Let's see how my buddies are doing. Oh no, my buddies are escaping. We've got a jailbreak. Let's get you guys back in here. There we go. Had a few escapees. I just got my Nightcrawlers for the season. I know y'all may be aware we buy Nightcrawlers in bulk, but I've had some interest in how we keep them. People have been asking how we keep them and how long they last. When you get live Nightcrawlers, you can keep them almost indefinitely. I've had them last 6 months if they're properly cared for. Now that does take a little bit of work and effort to keep them healthy and alive, so I'm going to run through that process in this video. First thing you're going to need is somewhere to keep your bait refrigerated. Especially worms and Nightcrawlers, they need to be kept cold. We bought this extra refrigerator here for our basement, and it serves a dual purpose. Not only do we keep our Nightcrawlers in it, but in the fall when we're hunting deer, it's a great place to keep our deer quarters. After we take a deer, we can quarter it and keep it in a controlled temperature here as we age and process the meat, as opposed to letting it hang outside in a tree where the temperatures could be 60 degrees. Our season starts that early. But anyway, back to the Nightcrawlers. Now these guys are escaping. I put them in here the other night, and I got their bedding all mixed up. The first step you want to do is provide a good home for your Nightcrawlers, and when they arrive you need to be prepared as soon as they get there with bedding. I like to use a sphagnum moss bedding. I get that from Magic Products. You can use the bus bedding or any other commercial paper-based beddings. They're readily available at places like Walmart. You want to use dechlorinated water. So set some water out when you order your Nightcrawlers in buckets and let that sit for at least 24 hours to let the chlorine come out of the water, and preferably that water should be cold as well. Then it's kind of trial and error to get your bedding mixture right. You want to mix it up. You don't want it soupy so the worms are swimming in it. You don't want it so dry that the bedding sticks to their skin. You want it damp enough to a point where when you squeeze a handful of bedding, it's wet, but you don't get a lot of water running out of it. Trial and error will get the right mix down for you. Just add a little more water if it's too dry, add a little more bedding if it seems too wet. Now when your worms arrive, I don't like to overcrowd them either, so I have a lot of containers ready for them. They come in bulk of 500, and I like to keep about 250 in the original container, which I will fill almost to the top with the bedding mixture. And I'll have the other containers, the little sour cream containers here. I like to keep 50 in those, and this bigger one here, I've got 100 in this one, this big round one. But I don't want them crowded, because when they're crowded, they tend to die more quickly. You want to give them plenty of room. And when I get them, I will lay the worms out across the top of the bedding loosely and then put them in the refrigerator. Now you have to check them for a couple days like I did this morning, because that bedding will be warm. It'll take a little while to cool down in the refrigerator, even if you've had the water sitting outside. And the worms, they usually look pretty scrawny when you first get them, and then they puff up. But what you can do is you need to go back for the next several days as they make their way down into the substrate and look at what's still on the top. If you find dead worms or injured worms that are still on the top, take them out immediately. Nightcrawlers give off a gas when they die, and if you leave them in the bedding, it's going to kill the rest of your batch pretty quickly. So make sure you remove all the dead ones. Now, after a few days, you'll find they've buried down into the substrate. If you continue to have a problem with worms escaping like these did, make another container of bedding and reduce the amount of worms in the container so they have more room. They won't bury down, all of them won't bury down if you have too many of them in the same container. But after a few days, they should all go down into the substrate. Now let's talk about how to keep them healthy. And the first thing you do is you can't just throw them in there and expect them to be there when you come back. You're going to have to feed your worms. Keeping your worms well fed and happy is not difficult at all. There are many commercial Nightcrawler foods on the market. This comes from Magic Products. It's the same company I get the sphagnum moss from. You can just look up worm food online, find a bunch of worm food. You can even get away with feeding them cornmeal if you want to. The procedure for feeding them is simple. You just shake some powder in a bowl, and then you add water. Now I'm here at my fish tank because you do want to use dechlorinated water. And my aquarium here is a good source for that. If you're keeping minnows in a minnow tank, live minnows for bait, you can use water from the minnow tank. If you don't have an aquarium, go ahead and just let a glass of water sit out for 24 hours so the chlorine comes out of it. Use dechlorinated water and add it to the mix. Now you don't want this mix soupy and muddy. So if you add a little too much to it, like this here, go ahead and add a little more powder to it until you get it dry and crumbly but damp. Then you just sprinkle it right over top of the worm bedding and check it every few weeks, replacing it as needed. That's about it for keeping worms. There's one more step to keep your night crawlers healthy and happy, and that is to rebed them once a month. The dead worms, if you leave them in there, they're going to kill your whole container. So once a month, go ahead and dump out your containers, add new fresh bedding, and then pick out all the worms and put them in a new bedding. You'll probably find after a month there'll be a few dead ones in the corners, maybe in the bottom. So take out any sick or dead worms. Those worms will last you indefinitely if you take good care of them like that. Typically, we get 500 for the beginning of the season, and they last us right through the entire spring fishing season. We've usually just about used them up and order another 500 for our summer vacation, like when we go to Deep Creek Lake to go fishing. We'll need another batch by then. But buying bait in bulk, worms, minnows, what have you, can save you a lot of money. Now, over the years, we've learned some little tricks to save us money, since fishing is kind of expensive if you do a lot of it. And we created a series called the Frugal Fishing Series. These videos in these playlists are filled with money-saving tips and fishing tips that can help you save a little money and be more successful while you're doing it. So until we get out in the field and get some fresh content filmed this spring, be sure to check a few of those videos out. We're Camo Chair Productions, sharing the outdoors on YouTube. We hope to see you again real soon.